King, Louisiana makes resisting arrest a hate crime against cops. I would say welcome to Trump's America, but Louisiana's Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards signed this horrendous bill into law before Trump took office. Now that Louisiana's Blue Lives Matter law is in full effect, the troubling consequences are already being felt across the state. According to St. Martinville Police Chief Calder Hibbert, if a man is arrested for the misdemeanor of stealing a candy bar from a convenience store, but then resists arrest, he can and will be charged with a felony hate crime and sentenced to up to 10 years in prison for it. In fact, if someone is wrongly arrested, but then resists that wrongful arrest, instead of simply being charged with the misdemeanor of resisting arrest, they, too, can be charged with a felony hate crime against police. It doesn't matter if they actually hate police or not, which would seem to be a necessary requirement of a hate crime, but resisting arrest is being made into a serious felony nonetheless. In fact, Hibbert told Cathk News that he is already enforcing the law and charging people with felony hate crimes against police when they resist arrest. Resisting an officer or battery of a police officer was just that charge, simply. But now, Governor Edwards, in the legislation, made it a hate crime now, said the chief. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why we have more people in prison than any other nation in the world. Making resisting an arrest into a felony hate crime is preposterous. First off, the charge of resisting arrest is already outrageously nebulous and regularly abused by police who can deem even the slightest movement or failure to immediately reply to a command as resisting arrest. Webb. Louisiana's controversial Blue Lives Matter bill, signed into law by a Democratic governor, deems resisting arrest a hate crime. Getty Images. I knew a man who had a police dog biting him all over his body, including his genitals, who was then charged with resisting arrest because he did not remain calm and still. I knew a woman who was charged with resisting arrest because of her sluggish behaviors during a diabetic attack. These laws, like most laws in America, will be used to criminalize blackness itself. White police officers will disproportionately enforce this new felony hate crime statute against people of color. Conservatives will then say more people of color are being charged with this ridiculous felony because people of color resist arrest more. It's also damn predictable. What I know is that when a young white kid who had too much to drink gets a little rowdy with the police, this law simply won't be applied to him. That'd simply be too much. Instead, Louisiana's already crowded jails and prisons will continue to be overstuffed with black and brown bodies who did not endure arrest in robotic silence, no matter how tight the cuffs or bogus the charge. Not only that, but I have a hunch that body cameras will now work consistently when filming these scenarios. The same cameras that seem to always turn off right before an incident of police brutality will become the most reliable technology in the world when needed to film someone resisting arrest. We are the incarceration nation, and laws like this are what keep us on the trajectory of the problem getting worse and worse. And while it is always so much easier and convenient to blame Trump or blame conservatives, a Democrat signed this stupid law into existence. What a mess, a truly American mess. Your right to forcefully resist unlawful arrest, as stated by U.S. Supreme Court, July 6, 2014. By John Henry Hill. In original articles. Leave a comment. Your right to forcefully resist unlawful arrest by John Henry Hill, M.D. Revised, February 14, 2014. Reposted, June 6, 2014. Definitions of liberty. Liberty. 1. Exemption from slavery, bondage, imprisonment, or control of another. 2. Freedom from external restraint or compulsion. Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary. Liberty. Freedom. Exemption from extraneous control. The power of the will to follow the dictates of its unrestricted choice, and to direct the external acts of the individual without restraint, coercion, or control from other persons. Black's Law Dictionary -3rd edition. Liberty. Freedom. Exemption from extraneous control. Freedom from all restraints except such as are justly imposed by law. Ex part Kreutzer, 187 Wis. 463, 204, 595, 604. Freedom from restraint, under conditions essential to the equal enjoyment of the same right by others. Freedom regulated by law. Kelly v. James, 37 SD 272, 157 NW 990, 991. The absence of arbitrary restraint, not immunity from reasonable regulations and prohibitions imposed in the interests of the community. Southern Utilities Company v. City of Palatka, 86 Florida 583, 99 So. 236, 240. Nelson v. Tilley, 137 Nib. 327, 289, 388, 392, 126 ALR 729. Arnold v. Board of Barber Examiners, 45 New Mexico 57, 109 P.2D 779, 785. Black's Law Dictionary -6th edition. Line of asterisks. Introduction. In modern America, most people assume that when police officers attempt to arrest a man, without a court-issued verified, lawful arrest warrant and accompanying sworn under oath affidavit by the accuser, that the man must submit to the police officer without resistance. In point of fact, nothing could be farther from the truth. Under the ancient legal systems of common law of Britain and America, a man, and any other people present, have the right to forcefully resist an arrest by police which he/they believes is unlawful and or in which the police use excessive force to effect the arrest. Second, it is the arrestee and the other people present to decide what constitutes an unlawful arrest and what constitutes excessive police force, not the police officer and not the government. Third, the man and other people have the right to use any force necessary to gain and maintain the freedom of the arrestee, even to the point of killing the police officer. The logic behind this common law was that since all men are equal before the law, the common law, and before God, each man has the same unalienable rights and, therefore, the police had no authority or powers beyond those of all other men. Indeed, all men were required to observe and maintain the peace, not just the police. In effect, making every man the equivalent of a peace officer. Therefore, the police had no additional authority or powers. The only distinction was that the police were employed by the state to assist the people in maintaining the peace. And under the common law, a crime required that one man injure the body and or property of another individual man. If there was no injury, there was no crime. And, most importantly, the concept of property included a man's physical body, his rights, his freedom, his land, and all of his other personal possessions. When the first police forces were established in a few of the largest American cities in the 1850s, these police were viewed as peace officers whose sole task was to maintain the peace by enforcing the common law only. The police were not allowed to enforce statutes, legislated acts which establish only policy, which is not true law. In fact, in present-day Britain, the police are still considered to be first and foremost constables, peace officers, whose sole authority is to maintain the peace. Thus, the police as constables on their oath can become involved only when a crime under the common law has been committed, true public criminal law requiring that another man has been injured physically or a man's property has been damaged. The police, as true peace officers, cannot enforce civil law, private law, as statutes, acts, codes, regulations, etc., which acquire the force of law only if an individual man consents to that particular statute, since legislated statutes and acts are offers to contract, which each man is free to accept or reject. Once a British police officer attempts to enforce legislated statutes, He has broken his oath to the king or queen, ceases to be a lawful constable and peace officer, and is considered to have committed treason. In America, the concept of a constable was and is to the present day embodied in the public office of sheriff, who was viewed as the ultimate enforcer of the peace and the common law. The sheriff can enforce civil law statutes only to the extent that those statutes, as contracts which are private, commercial law, conform to the common law rights regarding contracts. If a man has not consented to a legislated statute, an offer to contract, then the police and sheriff have no authority to enforce that statute, contract, on that particular man, since that man has not agreed to give the force of law to that statute, contract. The notion that a police officer can arrest anyone he believes has committed a crime, and that the arrestee must meekly submit, is a very recent idea, based on statutory, private commercial law. Indeed, until the late 1960s, most states recognized, albeit grudgingly, the common law right to resist arrest. By 1969, that right had been transmuted, not by statute or constitutional amendment, but through judicial activism, into a revocable privilege, one that had to be dispensed with to serve the interests of the police and the state in securing convictions. However, under the common law of America, a man still possesses the right to forcefully resist any unlawful arrest, with as much force as necessary to maintain his freedom, even to the point of killing the arresting police officer. However, when the state, using statutory, commercial law, subsequently attempts to punish the man for his exercising his rights, it is essential that a man understand how to maintain his rights and defend himself under the common law. The courts of today will presume that a man has consented to be prosecuted under the jurisdiction of that court acting as a legislative court, acting under statutory, commercial law, unless that man stridently, repeatedly objects to that presumption and establishes and maintains the court as a true court of record operating under the common law only, which means that statutes, legislated acts, regulations, etc., do not apply, and that the judge may act solely as an administrator, not the tribunal of the court, which means the judge can issue no decisions or rulings. Only the tribunal, in the form of the plaintiff or jury, can issue any decisions or rulings. Background: the common law versus statutory, private commercial law. Beginning with the Magna Carta, the governments in Britain and later the United States of America have recognized the right to the people to forcefully resist unlawful arrest by the government agents, including police, using deadly force if necessary. It was long recognized as a natural and common law right of not only the person being arrested, but also of one's fellow countrymen trying to assist him in resisting such an unlawful arrest. Common law supersedes statutory law, which is private law, unless an individual knowingly and freely consents to waive his natural unalienable and common law rights and consents to submit to statutory or contractual policy. I say statutory policy because, strictly speaking, law refers only to the public common law, whereas legislative acts, as statutes, acts, codes, regulations, ordinances, etc., are private law whose jurisdiction is extremely limited. One might draw the analogy of a man who joins a private club or buys a house in a neighborhood controlled by a private homeowners association. The club or association has the right to determine the rules for its members, along with the penalties for breaking those rules. Strictly speaking, these rules, often called bylaws, are not true law. They are so-called private law, that is, the rules or policies apply only to members of this private group. The man is not forced to join the club or association. He does so through his voluntary consent in a contract, in which commercial law applies. He pays his dues in exchange for being a member of the club/association, with its attendant duties, obligations and benefits, privileges, thus consideration is exchanged. As a member, the man has consented to the jurisdiction of the club/association in club/association related matters only. A non-member who is not inside the club/association's buildings, on its land or attending some private event staged by the club/association, is not bound by the rules or policies of the club/association. However, should a non-member voluntarily consent to abide by the club association's rules/policies in exchange for being allowed inside the club association's building along with other benefits and privileges, that non-member has therein contracted with the club association and is under its jurisdiction regarding rules/policies of conduct, at least as long as he remains within the club association's building and/or is enjoying some other benefits and privileges normally associated with membership in that club association. Such rules and policies created under a private contract are known as private law. In this case, commercial law or contract law, which evolved from law merchant or the law of the seas. The mare in the word merchant is derived from the Phoenician Canaanite Latin French word of mare or sea. In short, law refers strictly to public common law, the law of the L.